It's time to shit on the Gravel Institute. It's time to take a big old dump all over them. Let's do it.
Americans generally think of Brazil as a country of beaches, jungles, and Christ the Redeemer.
I don't think Americans think about Brazil at all.
A friendly tourist destination with fun and festivity. But Brazil isn't just a nice spot for a vacation. It's one of the most unequal countries in the world. It's also a country with one of the most successful socialist movements of our time. In 1888, Brazil abolished slavery, the last country in the Americas to do so. But even after a republic was established in 1889, elites excluded most people from voting.
I don't know how you could possibly claim that Brazil has the most successful socialist movement of all time. Like, what is he talking about? What could he possibly be talking about?
Using their power to enrich themselves and their families. For decades, Brazil was a textbook oligarchy, based on coffee with milk politics, a reference to the agrarian economies of the two most influential states. The government acted above all to
I'm not even going to name the states. Whatever.
Protect elite interests, while millions languished in poverty. As Brazil urbanized, peasants flocking to cities could see prosperity around them, but couldn't reach it. They built sprawling informal settlements called favelas, stark illustrations of the country's disparity. By the early 1960s, an alternative vision emerged, based on land redistribution and expanded democracy. Communists, peasants, workers, and students support.
Communists, peasants, workers, and students. It's like the communists are like their own like class of person, right? Like they're just separated from the rest of them.
Supported this reformist push, but then fearing
this is like explaining the concept of land reform if you're like to a literal child or something. Like I feel incredibly condescended to you right now.
Communist takeover, the United States and local elites supported a military coup. From 1964 to 1985, Brazil was ruled by a brutal dictatorship that killed and tortured thousands of people. But by the late 1970s, something was changing. Workers noticed their wages were not keeping pace with the rising cost of living. It turned out they were getting paid significantly less than the regime let on. So, led by a combative, charismatic union leader named Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, commonly known as Lula, workers in the industrial heartland around São Paulo went on strike. Lula understood well the indignities of the working class. His parents were illiterate peasants who struggled to give their kids a better life. And he didn't learn to read until he was 10. When he was 18, he crushed his pinky in a workplace accident. And by the time he was seen by a doctor 4 hours later, there was no choice but to amputate the finger. Driven by these experiences, Lula and those around him realized that workers needed their own political party. So in 1980, they created the Partido dos Trabalhadores, the Workers' Party.
Like, there's like inspiring music playing. It reminds me of the Bay Area video where he plays like inspiring music while talking about how epic Maduro is.
It was the first party in Brazil created for workers by workers. The Workers' Party grew quickly, and in 2002, after 3 failed attempts, Lula was elected president. In office, Lula recognized that Brazil's fundamental problem was the grinding poverty and inequality that previous governments had mostly ignored. So in 2003, Lula's administration introduced Bolsa Família, the family stipend. Basically, the government would guarantee an income to families in extreme poverty.
Okay, he introduced basic welfare, a very basic welfare program that a lot of countries had before that. Pretty good thing. But why is this being sold like it's the solution to poverty, like it's something incredibly revolutionary that no one ever thought of before?
Those earning less than $17 per person per month. And when poor families over the official poverty line were expecting a child or had a child below 18, they would get extra income too. As long as families get vaccinations and keep their kids in school, they can receive benefits indefinitely. There's no mandatory drug testing and no work requirement.
I guess this sounds revolutionary to Americans because they literally cannot imagine a welfare system where welfare queens are not duly punished and forced to suffer in order to get like their meager stipend.
With this guaranteed monthly income, poor families can meet their basic needs and afford safer living conditions. The program doesn't provide a lot by American standards. Most families receive about $38 a month. But for the neediest Brazilians, it has been transformational. Compared to what other countries were doing, The scale of Bolsa Familia was incredible. In the 1990s, US President Bill Clinton had implemented welfare reform. He made it more difficult to access government benefits. Promising to end welfare as we know it, he instituted work requirements and drug tests. It
Classic Bill Clinton, Thatcherite sort of stuff.
became so complicated and humiliating to secure government assistance that many Americans who needed support received no help at all. Extreme poverty soared. Brazil's radical experiment, meanwhile, had the exact
He's getting up and moving. This is revolutionary. You never see this in a PragerU video.
opposite effect. Bolsa Familia quickly became an international success story. For one thing, it dramatically reduced poverty. By 2015, the percentage of the population living below the international poverty line had dropped from 13% to just 3%. Bolsa Familia helped lift
I mean, the international poverty line is a fucking shitty measure to use, but it did reduce poverty.
over 40 million people out of extreme poverty.
The thing is, like, programs like this aren't like that contradictory to like neoliberal orthodoxy. Yeah, out of all the pink-tied leaders, Lula was the most neoliberal, and there's no one who would really disagree with that. Like, trying to sell it, I guess for an audience of ignorant Americans, this might seem incredibly revolutionary, but I mean, even fucking Milton Friedman wanted a negative income tax, which is basically a form of universal basic income that only applies to the poorest in society. So it's not like the idea of just giving money to poor people is some sort of revolutionary idea that contradicts neoliberalism by itself.
In one of the most unequal countries in the world, it has cut wealth inequality by as much as 20%. Bolsa Familia has also significantly reduced child labor and improved educational outcomes for the poorest children. Studies suggest the program has helped lower rates of domestic violence, postpartum depression, suicide, and even tooth decay in children. Bolsa Familia isn't just a cash transfer program. It's a successful attempt to wrestle with a legacy of social neglect. For many Brazilians, Bolsa Familia is the most tangible example of the state acting on their behalf. It represents the very promise of citizenship. It directly attacks poverty in the present, enabling families to invest in their children's future. Lula left office in 2010 as one of the most popular leaders on earth, and by far the most popular in Brazilian history. Bolsa Familia was a major reason for that. In fact, when a far-right extremist won the presidency in 2018, he sought ways to
Just the far-right extremist. I get, like, there's probably people in the comments here, like, saying that Lula implemented this to buy votes or something. A lot of those millions lifted out of poverty didn't have any improvement on their lives. How does that work? Like, you like, basically, like, give them, like, 50% more income, or in some cases, like, double, and that didn't improve their lives. Interesting. What's this? It wasn't a military dictatorship, it was a regime? What does that mean? The country had much more freedoms than even today, and security. Like, yeah, every single fucking comment here is just like, Brazilian rich right-wingers saying, giving poor people money bad.
Ran the program as his own. So while the United States sought to push people out of poverty by forcing them off welfare, socialists in Brazil did the exact opposite. They opened government support to more people. In the US,
It's not, I mean, Bolsa Familia was good, better, it's much better, more inclusive welfare system than most countries, especially in the third world, have, but like, it's not socialist, dude. And selling it as socialist is probably bad for you considering you're a fucking American.
poverty went up. In Brazil under Lula, poverty shrunk, inequality fell, and the economy grew to 5 times the size than when Lula took office. Now, Brazil is still marked by serious inequality, but the Workers' Party showed that governments can act to dramatically reduce poverty. The first step is recognizing that poor people don't become less poor if their government calls them lazy or makes them take a drug test just to afford groceries.
Yeah, but that does maintain the hierarchy that benefits me. So can we please do it? Thank you.
Families to meet their material needs, and they'll lead better lives. Lula remains popular in Brazil because he acknowledged that everyone deserves a dignified life, regardless of their class or income. And as we confront the rot that
it's interesting, like, they put, like, the hashtags, like, we haven't talked about car wash in this video at all, and I don't think there's time for them to mention it. There's only 50 seconds left. But they, like, put all these hashtags here, like, Lula libre, Lula inocente, and it's like, but without the context, this means nothing. Like, someone's gonna read this and be like, what? Why does it matter that he's innocent? Why does it matter that he's free? Like, they could have like explained that what he did was hated so much by like the previous oligarchs that like they literally just like forged a corruption case to put him in jail, and that's what even like very milquetoast reformists like Lula have to deal with to get anything done. You do something that really is very close to conforming with established neoliberal orthodoxy. The only reason that it didn't really conform that much is because it didn't have that many compliance requirements as other welfare programs, and still that's like a huge line to be crossed, and they need to put him in jail. You know, they could have added like an extra minute to talk about that easily. And it also would have gotten them over the 8-minute mark so that they could get an extra ad in their video, because you can only put like in-video ads in your video if that play in the middle of your video if the video's over 8 minutes. Gravel Institute, give me money and I'll tell you these basic things about YouTube that you should think about when you're doing your videos.
Regardless of their class or income. And as we confront the rot that prosperous elites in this country have allowed to fester for too long, we might learn something from the example of the Workers' Party in Brazil. I'm Andre Pagliarini, professor of history and Latin American studies at Dartmouth for the Gravel Institute.
I mean, it wasn't bad in the sense that it wasn't explicitly wrong or anything, but it definitely overstates. But I mean, for an audience of idiotic Americans for whom the idea of like any sort of welfare program is ludicrous, it's okay, I guess. And I guess the reason why they're talking so slowly and simply is because Americans are incredibly stupid people and they need to be talked to as if they're children. So yeah, I guess it's okay.